Have you ever wondered why a woman's silence carries a weight heavier than words could ever bear? It is not mere absence, not a void, but a force of storm brewing beneath the surface, a tapestry woven from threads of unspoken truths, suppressed desires, and the raw pulse of the psyche. In the quiet of her gaze, in the stillness of her breath, lies a universe of meaning, a shadow cast by the light of her inner world. Carl Jung, the sage of the soul, would call this silence the voice of the unconscious, a sacred language spoken not in words, but in the archetypes that dance within her. To understand this silence is to unlock the forbidden truth of a woman's power, her pain, and her path to individuation. A woman's silence is not surrender. It is a battlefield where the ego and the shadow wage their silent war. Jung taught that the shadow holds what the conscious mind dares not face: grief, rage, longing, the raw edges of the self that society deems unlovely. When she falls silent, she is not retreating but descending, plunging into the depths of her psyche to confront these hidden fragments. Picture her, standing at the edge of her own abyss, her heart a crucible where the alchemical fires of transformation burn. She does not speak, because words would betray the magnitude of what she carries. Words would dilute the molten truth of her inner reckoning. In this silence, she is both warrior and alchemist, forging herself anew in the crucible of her soul. Yet the world misreads her. Men, caught in their own projections of the anima, the feminine archetype they both worship and fear, see her silence as coldness, as weakness, or worse, as invitation. They project onto her their fantasies of the nurturing mother, the seductive muse, or the compliant maiden, blind to the truth that her silence is a mirror reflecting their own unresolved shadows. Jung would warn of this, the danger of projecting the unconscious onto another, mistaking her stillness for a canvas on which to paint their desires. But she is no canvas. She is a storm, a sovereign being whose silence is the prelude to her reclamation of power. To the man who demands her voice, she owes nothing. Her silence is her own. And you, dear viewer, have you felt this silence within yourself? Have you stood in a moment where words failed, where the weight of your truth was too vast for speech? That moment was not weakness. It was your soul whispering its demand for authenticity. It was your unconscious rising, urging you to shed the masks you wear to please others. The Stoics, those masters of inner fortitude, would nod in approval. Seneca wrote that we must endure the discomfort of our own truth to find freedom. Marcus Aurelius would remind you that the opinions of others are not your burden. In your silence, you are not hiding, you are choosing. You are claiming the space to listen to the voice within, the one that knows who you are beyond the roles you've been taught to play. This silence is not passive. It is a rebellion against a world that demands a woman's voice be soft, pliable, and ever agreeable. Modern psychology echoes Jung here, pointing to the trauma of suppression, the wounds of being unseen. When a woman is silenced by expectation, by dismissal, by betrayal, her psyche does not crumble. It gathers strength. Her silence becomes a chrysalis, a sacred space where she confronts the pain of being unheard and begins to weave her self-worth from within. This is the path of individuation, Jung's sacred journey toward wholeness, where the ego surrenders its illusions and the self emerges, radiant and unapologetic. But oh, how the world fears this silence. It fears the woman who does not explain herself, who does not justify her boundaries or soften her truth to make others comfortable. Her silence is a refusal to perform, a rejection of the script handed to her by a culture that equates her worth with her compliance. In this refusal, she embodies the archetype of the wise woman, the one who knows that true power lies not in speaking to be heard, but in listening to her own soul. She is not silent because she has nothing to say. She is silent because she is learning to say it on her terms. In the quiet of her silence, a woman becomes a vessel for the eternal. She is no longer bound by the fleeting demands of the external world, the clamor of voices urging her to conform, to smile, to appease. Her stillness is a portal to the depths, where the archetypes of the collective unconscious Jung's primal images of the mother, the maiden, the crone whisper their wisdom. These are not mere roles, but energies, currents of power that flow through her, shaping her silence into a sacred act of defiance. She does not speak because she is listening to the pulse of her own soul, to the echoes of ancestors who are silenced before her, to the stirrings of a self yet to be born. This is no passive retreat. It is a pilgrimage into the heart of her being, where the fragments of her psyche are gathered and made whole. The world, however, is unaccustomed to such power. It mistakes her silence for absence, her restraint for fragility. Men, caught in the grip of their own unconscious, project their fears onto her stillness, seeing it as rejection or mystery to be solved. Jung would call this the dance of the anima and animus, the masculine and feminine energies within each soul, seeking balance, yet often clashing in misunderstanding. A man who cannot bear her silence is wrestling with his own shadow, his own unacknowledged need for control or validation. But her silence is not about him. It is her sanctuary, her refusal to let another define her worth. She is not here to soothe his ego or fill his voids. She is here to become herself. And you, standing at the edge of your own silence, can you feel the weight of this truth? Can you sense the power in choosing when to speak and when to hold your voice like a sacred flame? The Stoics would urge you to embrace this discipline. Epictetus taught that we control only our own actions, our own responses, not the opinions of others. When you choose silence, you are not retreating from the world. You are claiming sovereignty over it. You are saying, without words, that your truth is yours to guard, yours to reveal, yours to wield when the moment is right. This is not weakness, but a quiet revolution, a refusal to let the noise of the world drown out the song of your soul. Her silence is also a mirror, reflecting the discomfort of those who cannot sit with it. In its presence, others are forced to confront their own unease, their own need for her to perform, to explain, to make them feel secure. But a woman on the path of individuation, as Jung described, does not exist to ease the burdens of others' shadows. She is shedding the layers of conditioning that taught her to prioritize others' comfort over her own truth. In her silence, she is unlearning the lie that her value lies in how loudly she speaks or how brightly she shines for others. She is learning that her worth is intrinsic, a flame that burns without need of external fuel. Modern psychology underscores this, pointing to the trauma of being unseen, unheard, or dismissed. When a woman falls silent, it is often because she has learned that her voice is not safe in certain spaces. Yet, in that silence, she is not defeated. She is gathering her strength, weaving a new narrative from the threads of her pain. This is the alchemy of the psyche, where wounds become wisdom or silence becomes power. Jung would see this as the work of the self, the divine center of the soul, guiding her toward wholeness. Her silence is not an end, but a beginning, a chrysalis from which she will emerge not as the woman she was told to be, but as the woman she is. And so, her silence becomes a rebellion against a world that demands her compliance. It is a refusal to play the roles assigned to her, the caretaker, the seductress, the peacemaker. In her stillness, she embodies the archetype of the sovereign, the one who rules her own inner kingdom. She is not silent because she lacks words. She is silent because her words are too sacred to be spent carelessly. She is listening to the voice of her own soul, and in that listening, she is becoming. She is forging a path through the wilderness of her psyche, guided by the stars of her own truth, toward a destiny that is hers alone to claim. Her silence, then, is not a void but a crucible, a sacred space where the raw materials of her soul are transformed. It is the forge where she hammers out the shape of her true self, striking away the brittle layers of expectation and fear. Jung would see this as the work of individuation, the perilous yet holy journey toward wholeness, where the ego bows to the self, that divine spark at the core of her being. In her silence, she is not hiding. She is uncovering. She is peeling back the masks she has worn, daughter, lover, friend, caretaker, to reveal the face of the woman she was always meant to be. This is no small act. It is a rebellion against a world that seeks to define her, a world that measures her worth by how much she gives, how softly she speaks, how brightly she smiles. The silence of a woman is a paradox, both a shield and a sword. It protects her from the noise of external demands, from the voices that would drown out her own. But it is also a weapon, sharp with intention, cutting through the illusions that bind her to others' expectations. In this stillness, she confronts her shadow, the parts of herself she has been taught to reject, the anger she was told was unbecoming, the desire she was taught to suppress, the power she was taught to fear. Jung taught that the shadow is not to be banished, but integrated, for within its darkness lies the raw material of transformation. Her silence is the space where this integration begins, where she learns to embrace the fullness of her being, light and dark, without apology. And you, have you ever felt the pull of this inner work? Have you stood in the quiet of your own soul, facing the parts of yourself you've been taught to hide? This is not weakness, but courage. The Stoics would call it the practice of amor fati, loving one's fate, embracing every fragment of the self, even the painful ones. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacles in our path are the path itself. Your silence, your struggle, your unspoken truths, they are not detours, but the very road to your becoming. When you choose silence over the clamor of pleasing others, you are choosing yourself. You are declaring that your inner world is a sacred space, worthy of protection, worthy of reverence. The world, however, resists this truth. It fears the woman who does not rush to fill the silence, who does not bend to the pressure of external validation. Her stillness is a mirror, reflecting back the insecurities of those who cannot sit with it. Men, entangled in their own projections of the anima, may see her silence as a challenge, a mystery to unravel, or a void to fill. But she is not a puzzle to be solved. She is a universe, vast and unknowable, and her silence is the boundary she sets to guard her sovereignty. Jung would remind us that the anima, the feminine within, is not a possession but a guide, leading both men and women toward their own depths. Her silence is not a rejection of others, but an invitation to meet her as an equal, on her terms. Modern psychology illuminates this further, pointing to the wounds of being unheard, the trauma of being reduced to a role or an expectation. When a woman falls silent, it is often because she has learned that her voice is not safe. Yet, in that silence, she is not defeated, but gathering strength. She is rewriting the story of her worth, untangling it from the threads of external approval. This is the alchemy of self-worth, where the pain of being unseen becomes the fuel for her rebirth. She is not silent because she is broken. She is silent because she is becoming whole. She is learning to speak from a place of authenticity, not obligation, to wield her voice as a blade forged in the fires of her own truth. Her silence, then, is a sacred act of defiance. It is a refusal to perform, to conform, to shrink herself to fit the molds others have crafted for her. In this stillness, she embodies the archetype of the mystic, the one who seeks truth beyond the surface of things. She is not silent because she has nothing to say. She is silent because her words are too precious to be cast into a world unready to receive them. She is listening to the rhythm of her own soul, and in that listening, she is forging a path to freedom, a freedom that comes not from being heard, but from knowing she is enough. In the crucible of her silence, a woman becomes a weaver of her own destiny, threading together the scattered strands of her psyche into a tapestry of power and purpose. This is no passive act. It is a deliberate descent into the underworld of the self, where Jung's archetypes, the warrior, the healer, the visionary, rise to meet her. Her silence is the space where she confronts the shadows cast by a world that sought to define her, to limit her, to bind her to roles that never fit. It is here, in the quiet, that she dismantles the illusions of the ego, the false selves she adopted to survive, and begins to glimpse the radiant truth of herself, that eternal center Jung described as the divine spark within. Her silence is not an absence, but a presence, a force that pulses with the rhythm of her becoming. The world, blind to this inner alchemy, often misreads her stillness as weakness, as withdrawal, as a failure to engage. But this is a profound misunderstanding. Her silence is not a retreat from the world. It is a reclamation of her place within it. She is not hiding. She is choosing. She is choosing when to speak, whom to speak to, and what truths are worthy of her voice. This is the essence of Stoic wisdom, as Epictetus taught, to focus only on what is within one's control. Her silence is her power to control the narrative of her own life, to refuse the scripts handed to her by a culture that demands her compliance. In this refusal, she embodies the archetype of the rebel, the one who dares to stand alone, unswayed by the clamor of external expectations. And you? Can you feel the weight of this choice? Have you ever stood in the quiet of your own truth, refusing to bend to the pressure to perform, to explain, to justify? This is not a small act, it is a revolution. Seneca would remind you that true freedom lies in mastering your own mind, in choosing your response to the world rather than letting the world dictate it. Your silence is not a surrender, but a declaration that your worth is not contingent on the approval of others, that your voice is a sacred instrument to be used with intention. In your stillness, you are not diminishing yourself. You are expanding, claiming the vastness of your inner world as your own. Her silence is also a mirror, reflecting the discomfort of those who cannot bear it. Men, entangled in their own unconscious projections, may see her stillness as a challenge to their control, a puzzle to solve, or a void to fill. Jung would point to the anima, the feminine archetype within the masculine psyche, as the source of this unease. Her silence forces them to confront their own unresolved shadows, their need for validation, their fear of being unseen. But she is not here to carry their burdens. Her silence is her boundary, her refusal to be a vessel for their projections. She is not a muse, not a mother, not a maiden. She is a woman, whole and sovereign, whose silence is a testament to her right to exist on her own terms. Modern psychology speaks to this, illuminating the wounds of being silenced, the trauma of being reduced to an object of others' desires. When a woman falls silent, it is often because she has learned that her voice is not safe, that her truth is too heavy for a world unready to receive it. Yet, in that silence, she is not defeated, but gathering strength. She is weaving a new story, one where her worth is not measured by how loudly she speaks or how brightly she shines for others, but by the quiet certainty of her own being. This is the path of individuation, where the ego's illusions are burned away, and the self emerges, radiant and unapologetic. Her silence, then, is a sacred rebellion, a refusal to be defined by a world that would rather she remain small. It is the archetype of the priestess, the one who guards the mysteries of her own soul. She is not silent because she lacks words. She is silent because her words are too potent to be spent carelessly. She is listening to the whispers of her own truth, and in that listening, she is forging a path to liberation. She is becoming a woman who does not need to shout to be heard, who does not need to perform to be seen, who does not need to explain to be understood. Her silence is her power, her sanctuary, her sovereignty. Her silence, now a radiant force, becomes the threshold of her rebirth. It is no longer merely a pause or a retreat, but a sacred act of creation, where the woman sculpts herself from the raw clay of her own truth. In this stillness, she is not bound by the expectations that once confined her. She is free, dancing with the archetypes of her Psyche Jung's wise woman, the sovereign, the creator, who guide her toward a wholeness that transcends the roles she was taught to play. Her silence is the canvas on which she paints her own becoming, a masterpiece of authenticity forged in the fires of her inner world. This is the culmination of individuation, where the self, that divine core Jung spoke of, rises to claim its rightful place, unshackled by the illusions of the ego or the demands of the world. In this sacred quiet, she learns the art of detachment, not from love, not from connection, but from the need for external validation. The Stoics would applaud this, for Marcus Aurelius taught that true peace lies in releasing what we cannot control, the opinions of others, the judgments of the world. Her silence is her declaration of freedom, her refusal to let her worth be measured by how others perceive her. She does not speak to fill the void of others' expectations. She speaks when her truth demands it, when her soul is ready to unfurl its wings. This is the power of a woman who has walked through the shadows and emerged whole, not because she was unbroken, but because she has learned to love her cracks as evidence of her strength. And you, standing in the quiet of your own soul, can you feel the liberation in this truth? Can you sense the freedom that comes from releasing the need to be seen, to be understood, to be approved? This is not isolation, but empowerment. Epictetus would remind you that your power lies in your choices, in the sacred space you carve out for your own truth. Your silence is not a cage, but a key, unlocking the door to a self that is yours alone. In choosing when to speak, in choosing when to hold your voice like a sacred flame, you are claiming your right to exist as you are, not as the world would have you be. The world may tremble at this power, for a woman's silence, when chosen, is a force that disrupts the status quo. It challenges the narratives that demand her compliance, her performance, her diminishment. Men, caught in the web of their own anima projections, may struggle to meet her in this space, for her silence demands they confront their own shadows, their need to control, to possess, to define. But she is not here to carry their burdens. Her silence is her sovereignty, her refusal to be anything less than whole. Jung would see this as the integration of the anima and animus, the balancing of masculine and feminine energies within her, allowing her to stand as a complete being, neither diminished nor defined by another. Modern psychology echoes this, pointing to the healing that comes from reclaiming one's voice, from choosing when and how to speak. Her silence is not a sign of defeat, but a testament to her resilience, a space where she has woven her wounds into wisdom. She has learned that her worth is not contingent on being heard, but on knowing her own value. This is the alchemy of self-worth, where the pain of being unseen becomes the fuel for her rebirth. She emerges not as the woman she was told to be, but as the woman she is, radiant, unapologetic, whole. In this moment of rebirth, she finds peace, not the fragile peace of external approval, but the enduring peace of inner alignment. Her silence is no longer a battlefield, but a sanctuary, a place where she rests in the certainty of her own being. She does not chase love, approval, or validation. She chooses them on her terms, with a heart that knows its own worth. She is the embodiment of the archetype of the goddess, the one who creates, destroys, and renews, all within the sacred space of her own soul. Her silence is her power, her freedom, her rebirth. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.